The Elite are on their way back to AEW with last night's vignette airing on Dynamite, teasing their return to the company, but the controversy doesn't end there because CM Punk, his camp, has spoken out about the alleged incident in Chicago a couple of months ago after All Out, alleging his dog was injured, alleging a stand his ground law. This is going to get really complicated. Plus, the Elite were reportedly backstage last night at Dynamite in Virginia, so this is a big breaking news story. Plus, MJF, seemingly now a babyface, was attacked as Dynamite went off the air last night. Bryan Danielson defeated Sammy Guevara as issues in the Blackpool Combat Club appeared to be rearing its head. Swerve and Our Glory is the new number one contenders for the Tag Team Championship. Several title matches announced for Dynamite next week as well as Rampage on Friday. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into. And just if you thought this situation with the Elite, with CM Punk, Omega, the Bucks, AEW was going to go away and one party was going to return and the other, CM Punk, was going to ride off into the distance, we have not a lot to say. Man, were you wrong, because we've got some more major developments when it comes to the Elite. Their return to AEW television with a teaser airing last night on Dynamite on TBS, plus Punk speaking out kind of for the first time about that incident in Chicago at the beginning of September. So let's get straight into this story, beginning with this teaser that aired on Dynamite last night. Now, it must be said, we uploaded a video late last night reporting on these reports that had come out from Fightful Select and others suggesting that the Elite could be on their way back to AEW television, with sources suggesting they could return imminently to, at the very least, their backstage roles as well as AEW television. Well, we got some confirmation on this last night and we got some big reports here. Could Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks be gracing the stages of All Elite Wrestling soon? During last night's edition of Dynamite on TBS, a video was shown which featured the Elite and Don Callis being burned out of a series of images highlighting their history in the company. It was somewhat Thanos-esque. It was like Thanos, the Mad Titan, had snapped his fingers and they had just erased. They'd been erased from AEW history, so like at the end of Infinity War or something of that nature. The audio was clips of them discussing their part in helping build All Elite Wrestling and their partnership. The final shot of the video showed the AEW logo being scorched, with the E notably disappearing before other letters, of course, All Elite Wrestling, suggesting there can't be an AEW without the Elite. Now, as noted previously, prior to Dynamite, reports had surfaced that the Bucks and Omega were set to return to the company, at the very least in a backstage capacity in the near future, with a meeting reportedly being held last week to work out the details of their return to All Elite Wrestling. Of course, the Elite hasn't been seen on AEW programming since reportedly being suspended following the backstage brawl after All Out back in September. The trio were allegedly involved in a physical altercation with CM Punk and his friend and backstage producer of AEW, who's since been fired, Ace Steel. Now, we've got some details on Punk's reaction to this, which we'll get onto in a second. Earlier on, of course, prior to that brawl, on that infamous night in Chicago, CM Punk had questioned the Elite's performance as executive vice presidents during the media scrum at All Out, in addition to blasting Hangman Page, blasting Scott Colton, also known as Colt Cabana. Since then, the fallout of Brawl Out has seen Ace Steel reportedly being fired from the company, while CM Punk is suspended but is supposedly in discussions to buy out the remainder of his contract with AEW. Of course, Omega and the Bucks were instrumental in helping launch AEW. The trio has been part of the company since its inception back in 2019, and they were the inaugural AEW World Trios champions. Now, Omega is a former AEW World Champion and AEW Tag Team Champion alongside Hangman Adam Page. Meanwhile, the Young Bucks are former two-time AEW World Tag Team Champions. But the drama doesn't stop there. As I mentioned, if it was just the teaser, of the Elite returning, that would be a lot to talk about this morning, but there's so much more, because in addition to this promo, this teaser, this vignette airing on TBS. Reportedly, the Elite were indeed backstage last night in Norfolk, Virginia. Following the reports, the Elite could be returning to AEW imminently. PW Insider and Fightful Select reported that the trio of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks were indeed backstage for Wednesday's Dynamite in Norfolk, Virginia. Of course, they hadn't been backstage for the company since that backstage brawl involving CM Punk following AEW All Out. It was also reported via Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select that Don Callis, Omega's manager, was also backstage Wednesday night in addition to being backstage for last Friday's edition of Rampage, which is certainly interesting. That was live in Jacksonville, Florida, of course. Of course, as I mentioned, this timeline for an on-screen return of Omega and the Young Bucks does appear to be finally now in motion, with that video playing on Dynamite centering around the Elite's disappearance from the company. So you would think, okay, that's the situation with the Elite. Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, they're on their way back. Reports are that they were backstage last night, which would mean they have been officially unsuspended, reinstated to AEW. But what about CM Punk? What's CM Punk's reaction? Are we seeing the Elite return to the company because finally we've got a breakthrough when it comes to CM Punk with this reported buyout of his contract, when it comes to this non-compete clause? What's the latest with CM Punk? Well, a lot's happening here because we also now have a reaction from CM Punk himself, or at the very least, CM Punk's camp. This is absolutely fascinating. Following the news that the Elite is returning to All Elite Wrestling imminently, and frankly already has, considering they were backstage last night in Norfolk, Virginia, Wrestling Inc. is now running with an exclusive suggesting they reached out to CM Punk's camp for a response, and they actually received one. Now, this is fascinating, of course, because the whole rant and the whole infamous discussion and speech about Scott Colton, Colt Cabana, Hangman Page, the EVP started in that post-AEW All-Out media scrum, and it was CM Punk directed to Wrestling Inc. managing editor Nick Hausman, who I know very well. And a lot of people felt bad for Nick at the time. I did, because Nick didn't do anything wrong. It just appeared that CM Punk just attacked him verbally. So it's certainly fascinating that Wrestling Inc. would reach out to CM Punk's camp and CM Punk would respond, or his camp certainly would respond, to none other than Nick Hausman. Now, Wrestling Inc. are reporting that AEW has not reached out to Punk since the incident following the all-out media scrum, in which Punk and his friend, trainer, A. Steel, reportedly got into that backstage brawl with the Elite. Sources have indicated that after the brawl, Punk was asked to stay quiet and agreed to do so. From the perspective of CM Punk's camp, the scrum itself, which became the talk of the wrestling world due to Punk's comments on Colt Cabana, Hangman Page, and the Elite, didn't seem like a big deal. To Punk, he didn't think his comments were a big deal, which I would say is slightly out of touch with reality, because everyone thought that was a big deal, because you can't talk about your co-workers and your company like that in a public forum in front of the assembled media. Now, as I mentioned, Punk believes that his words didn't seem like a big deal and only escalated once Punk's locker room door was, quote, kicked in and accidentally hit Punk's dog Larry in the face. This is where the story gets even wilder. So the phrase there, kicked in, is something we have heard several times, especially from CM Punk's camp, or certainly sources close to CM Punk's camp. Now, what's fascinating about that phrase there is that whilst initially the eyewitnesses or people from CM Punk's side of things said the door was kicked in, they later walked that back and said, wow, kicked in was more of a turn of phrase. It wasn't as if the Elite actually came in and kicked the door down. But according to Punk's camp, they're still using that phrase, kicked in. In addition to that, they're saying that when the door was kicked in, it accidentally hit CM Punk's dog Larry in the face. And reportedly, in a pre-scheduled veterinarian appointment a few days after the incident, Punk was informed that 2 of Larry's teeth had been knocked loose and had to be removed. They're suggesting that's because of the door hitting the dog in the face. This is absolutely insane. Now, it continues. Wrestling Inc. is reporting that Punk felt threatened and reacted in a legal way under Illinois' castle doctrine laws, which allow for use of force in defense of a person in their dwelling. Now, that's very interesting, because would you if this is CM Punk's locker room backstage at the Now Arena in Chicago, that's not CM Punk's dwelling. I assume, and my interpretation of things is that someone's dwelling is their home or personal property, i.e. a motor vehicle, a bus. If this was on CM Punk's bus, if the incident took place on CM Punk's bus, that would be slightly different. But in terms of a locker room, CM Punk doesn't own that locker room, so I don't know if that's necessarily their dwelling, or you could argue is someone's dwelling wherever they're habiting at the time. I don't know. Certainly, the fact that CM Punk's camp has referenced Illinois Castle Doctrine laws would suggest to me he at the very least has spoken to a legal defense team or a lawyer to suggest, how am I? What's my footing here like from a legal point of view? Now, at this time, Wrestling Inc. is also reporting there is no litigation against CM Punk on behalf of anyone involved. It was also relayed to Wrestling Inc. that Steele's wife, Lucy, was in the room during the incident, but has not been interviewed as part of this internal investigation into the matter. Finally, Wrestling Inc. were also informed that following Hangman Adam Page's comments on a May episode of Dynamite, which is where all of this really began, alluding to backstage concerns about CM Punk, there was a distrust on Punk's end going into his AEW World Championship match with Adam Page at Double or Nothing 2022, and that Punk was concerned that the predetermined match would break down into a real physical fight. So there is a lot there, and it must be said, from my perspective, and this is just my perspective here, some of Punk's comments, in my opinion, seem like a stretch. And maybe that's why AEW now feel confident enough to bring the Elite back to television, because there are some things there that just seem odd to me. As I mentioned, the part where the door being kicked in was then walked back by several people that were close to CM Punk, and now he's saying that once again. In addition, his perspective that his comments weren't a big deal at the All Out Media Scrum, they were absolutely a big deal. They're incredibly unprofessional, and you can't behave in that way, especially if you're the world champion, especially if you're the top guy in the company. Again, I don't agree with that. Now, as far as Punk's dog being hit in the face and knocking teeth loose, that's absolutely an issue. And you could argue, if indeed the door was kicked in and it hits... the question then would be, well, how, if the door wasn't kicked in and the door didn't hit the dog in the face, how did the dog have loose teeth? Now, they could come loose at any point, but certainly I think that's being pointed out as to, no, this definitely happened, because otherwise, why would my dog have loose teeth? I don't know. And this is why this story is just so wild. As far as the Castle Doctrine laws, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know Illinois law. I don't know US law, so I couldn't tell you how accurate that is. From my perspective, I don't know, again, if he really was in his dwelling, therefore he could use force in defense of a person in his dwelling, unless this took place on his bus, which we know he does have, but reportedly it didn't. It took place in his locker room. So again, I'm not sure about that. It certainly is curious that someone that was there, that was an eyewitness, Lucy Steele, has not also been interviewed. That's certainly curious as well. As far as going back to his issues of Hangman Page, I would think, you know, CM Punk's been in the business a really long time. If he was really concerned about Hangman Page not doing business, you could argue, well, it's pro wrestling at the end of the day. Surely you have to back yourself to be able to get things done. And whilst maybe what he did was unprofessional on Dynamite, there would still be ways around ensuring that you would win that match, I believe. So I don't know. I look at this, certainly, as I mentioned, the Elites teased last night. They're back. They were backstage, so they're back in the company. And I think, and we'll have to wait and see what other reports come out about this, but I think that AEW now feel confident enough that if this were to be taken to a legal route, which it hasn't right now, if it was to be taken to a legal route, they feel that they're relatively safe. It would also appear, not that this is about a situation of taking sides, it would appear that they probably are siding with the Elite side of things. They are siding with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks' perspective of the incident. And I don't see, particularly with this news from Punk's end of things, I don't see a scenario where CM Punk ever returns to AEW. They didn't mention about the buyout or anything like that, so that it would appear that certainly is a part of it. I'm surprised to hear something from Punk anyway, because I would think if they're negotiating a buyout of his contract, surely he would be limited to an NDA, or certainly the terms of a buyout would be an NDA, maybe because that hasn't been confirmed just yet. they can speak out. But again, they say CM Punk's camp. They don't say if it's CM Punk himself. I don't know. But certainly, this is not done yet. And after weeks of not hearing a lot, we're starting to hear quite significant stuff. And last night, of course, was absolutely significant with all of these reports. And, of course, the Elite being backstage and the teaser airing on television. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, because this story just continues to get wilder and wilder and wilder. And it's showing no signs of stopping anytime soon. Let's talk about Dynamite last night. It ended with a very interesting heel turn, and I guess officially a babyface turn. MJF appears to be continuing his push towards becoming a babyface. Last night on Dynamite, the show went off the air with the firm's W. Morrissey sending MJF through a table with a chokeslam, bringing to close a wild segment where MJF tried to rescue Jon Moxley from a beatdown at the hands of the firm. Earlier on in the night, MJF made it clear he'd fire Stokely Hathaway if the firm disobeyed his orders, which they were not to attack Moxley following his AEW World Championship defense against Penta El Zero Miedo in the main event. MJF had instructed Hathaway, if Moxley gets past Pentagon tonight, I need him 110% at full gear. So him, Regal, and all of his weirdo fanboys got no excuses when I beat him in that ring, so you don't need to go near him, lay a hand on him, or even look at him, or you're fired. Despite MJF's decree, the firm proceeded to attack Moxley following his victory over Penta, laying out the AEW World Champion with several chair shots. During the attack, it was revealed that someone had barricaded the Blackpool Combat Club's locker room, preventing Claudio Castagnoli, Bryan Danielson, and co. from rescuing Moxley from the attack. Thereafter, a conflicted-looking MJF ran down to the ring, pushing everyone off of Moxley as he proceeded to fire Hathaway and the firm. Almost immediately, Ethan Page nailed MJF with a big boot, and the entire firm began destroying their stablemate. While conventional wisdom suggests MJF is now babyface, fans on social media believe the angle on this week's Dynamite could be part of an elaborate swerve that leads to MJF reverting to his old ways. MJF had seemingly teased a babyface turn during his rivalry of CM Punk when he burst into tears. He then the next week attacked Punk. Of course, he was a babyface for a brief period before he turned his back on Cody Rhodes. I kind of feel the same in that the promo that MJF had with Renee Paquette was just maybe too over the top for it to be a genuine babyface promo. I was watching it and I was going, oh, he pandered to the crowd a lot, and just maybe a little bit too much. And I wouldn't be shocked if eventually it's revealed at some point that the person that barricaded the Blackpool Combat Club in the locker room was none other than MJF or something like that, maybe. I think that eventually MJF does become a babyface, and I think he should. But as I mentioned, last night was maybe just too on the nose, of being a babyface. And you could argue, well, why would the firm attack him? Why would he be put through a table? Because he's MJF and he's always trying to think 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps ahead. So I don't know. And look, and if it isn't part of an elaborate swerve or anything like that, I don't like the promo he did then, because that is too pandering. It is too babyface-ish. And as I've said, he can be a babyface, but the MJF babyface is nothing changes, just the opponents. Nothing in the gimmick, nothing in the character, nothing in the promo changes. So, I don't know. I didn't buy it. I don't buy it just yet. Bryan Danielson was in action last night as he defeated Sammy Guevara in an excellent match, it must be said. He got the victory after he got Guevara into a triangle, continued to hit elbow strikes to his head, and Guevara was out. The referee called the match in favor of the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. But it must be said, there is a larger story at play here, because Bryan Danielson maybe could be switching back to a heel or something like that, because conflict is certainly in the Blackpool Combat Club right now. After the first bout saw the members of the Jericho Appreciation Society take on the Blackpool Combat Club, dissension spilled over to conflict backstage. Surprisingly, Claudio Castagnoli pinned Chris Jericho, the Ring of Honor World Champion, clean in the middle of the ring, which I think suggests that maybe we're going to see Jericho versus Castagnoli at Final Battle. I still think we could be seeing Jericho versus Daniel Garcia at some point, but seemingly Castagnoli is going to get a future Ring of Honor World Championship match. But afterwards, they shot to a backstage interview with Renee Paquette and Bryan Danielson. And Bryan Danielson was initially airing his grievances, saying he would be taking out all of his frustration on Sammy Guevara in that aforementioned match. One of his frustrations, though, was Wheeler Yuta talking back to him. However, after Yuta and Castagnoli appeared, tensions continued to rise. Claudio had to interject between Yuta and Danielson, saying they would sit down and talk about their issues later, which of course they did, but then they were locked in their locker room by this mysterious force that I believe could be MJF. So maybe we're seeing at some point dissension in the Blackpool Combat Club. If they split them up already, that would be so frustrating, because they're the best faction really in AEW right now, and I don't think they will. I think it would just be a case of someone will leave and that's it. I think that's where they'll go. We have new number one contenders for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. An excellent match last night saw Swerve in Our Glory defeat FTR after some pretty nefarious tactics from Swerve Strickland hitting a low blow on Dax Harwood. It led to Keith Lee getting the victory for his team. And the thing is, clearly they're building to at some point there's going to be Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee break up. But it works. I like the fact that they're a heel tag team at this point. Swerve Strickland is a clear heel. He's a bad guy. He cheats. And Keith Lee is a good guy, but he's conflicted. And I think this could play out for a long time. And look, the matches they have, that match last night was great. FTR, Swerve Strickland, Keith Lee, excellent match. And again, I know eventually it's going to get to a point whereby Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee break up, because Swerve Strickland is money, by the way. He is such a villain, and he is perfect in his role as a villain. That guy can be a future AEW World Champion. I have no doubt about that. But I like the dynamic still of Swerve in Our Glory. I think, if anything, it's better that you've got one guy that's a bit bad and another guy that's trying to be good. I think it really works. So at some point, we're going to get Swerve in Our Glory versus the Acclaimed once again. And of course, they've had absolutely fantastic matches all out. Grand Slam edition of Dynamite, and a one in the future. When that will be, we'll have to wait and see. Speaking of title matches, we've got several announced for next week. Orange Cassidy will be defending his All-Atlantic Championship. There was a backstage segment. Of course, that's how you set up title matches in AEW. A backstage segment involving Rey Fenix, Luchasaurus and Christian Cage interrupted. Then Orange Cassidy came in, said we'll settle it next week. So we're getting an All-Atlantic Championship match next week on Dynamite. Speaking of championship matches, we're also getting a Ring of Honor World Championship match as well next week. After that loss in the opening match, the Ocho issued an open challenge on next week's Dynamite to any former ROH champion during a backstage interview with Tony Schiavone. He extended this to not just being world champions, he said tag team champions, TV champions, pure champions, any former champion or any champion, I'll face you next week. Now, you could argue, could be Claudio Castagnoli, or it could be, again, another former Ring of Honor star that's going to be coming back to the company. It could be Jerry Lynn. You know, could be Jerry Lynn, absolutely. I mean, he did drop him on his head last week. Jerry Lynn's had neck surgery, so I don't know. It covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of people on the AEW roster, it could be. So I don't necessarily know who that could be, but we'll have to wait and see, certainly. Also announced Jay Lethal will take on Darby Allin after he was attacked last week. Darby Allin did this backstage vignette where he explained Sting's recent absence, saying that he told Sting he needed to try it alone. And Darby Allin would need to seek revenge on Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt and Satnam Singh. To be honest, I have just really no interest in this feud whatsoever. I thought Jay Lethal was a babyface, considering he shook hands with Darby Allin a couple of weeks ago, but apparently he's not. I'm not sure. And the Acclaimed and AEW fans worldwide next week will celebrate a Scissorfield birthday celebration in honor of Daddy Ass himself. Billy Gunn will be celebrated next week as he turns, I think it's 59. Unbelievable shape for 59. Finally, speaking of championship matches, the TNT Championship will be on the line Friday night live on AEW Rampage as Wardlow faces off against the Kingdom's Matt Taven. I believe this is going to be in Connecticut. I might be wrong, but it's certainly going to be live once again, and they're putting a title match on there. Will it lead to ratings for Rampage? We'll have to wait and see, but certainly a title match is going to headline Friday's live show. So there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner and let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak for you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.